You know the scene, right? You've spent a good chunk of your day making a beautiful, rich stock from scratch. The whole kitchen smells incredible. The pot is just barely simmering away. And then you see it. That grayish, kind of foamy stuff starts to collect on the top. We call it scum, but what is it really? Well, today, let's break down the chemistry that's happening right there on your stovetop. Yeah, it's one of those kitchen mysteries we usually just accept. You grab a spoon, you skim it off, you move on with your life. But not today. Today, we're going to dig in and figure out what is actually floating on top of your beautiful broth. All right, so let's get right to it. What exactly is this foamy layer? I know it might look a little unappetizing, but it turns out it's a totally natural, expected part of the cooking process. The answer is actually surprisingly simple. Most of that scum is just proteins from the meat and bones. As they heat up, they change shape and clump together. That's called coagulation. Then they trap little air bubbles and float right up to the surface, bringing along some other stuff like tiny bits of blood residue and other impurities. So this leads to the age-old question for any cook. Do you skim it or do you leave it? Well, it really just comes down to what you're trying to make. If you skim it off, you're going to get a much clearer, cleaner tasting stock. Think of a perfect, delicate consommé. But if you leave it in, you're keeping some of those extra fats and flavors, which might be exactly what you want for a hearty, rustic stew. It's a culinary choice, not a safety one. But this brings up a much bigger question, doesn't it? I mean, when we see weird-looking fat and foam in our food, our brains can kind of jump to the worst-case scenario. Is this stuff actually bad for us? We've all heard the warnings about trans fats, and for very good reason. So it's totally fair to ask, is this foamy stuff secretly a source of those really unhealthy fats? And the answer, thankfully, is a clear, simple, and resounding no. You can take a breath. What you're skimming off your soup is not trans fat. And here's why. This is the crucial point. Trans fats are only created under really specific, pretty harsh conditions. We're talking about either an industrial process called hydrogenation or the super high heat you'd find in a deep fryer. Gently simmering a stock on your stove, that doesn't even come close. The fat in that foam is just the natural animal fat from your ingredients, plain and simple. Okay, so if it's not trans fat, then why do so many chefs insist on skimming it for a cleaner flavor? If it's just harmless protein and fat, what's causing that slightly bitter or muddy taste they talk about? Well, the answer is a whole different chemical process. And that process is called oxidation. I love this analogy. Think of it like oil that's slowly rusting. It's not actually rust, of course, but it's a similar idea. When the fats are exposed to heat and the oxygen in the air, they start to change on a chemical level. And it's not just the fats. Everything that's floating on the surface is reacting with the air. The proteins are changing color, the myoglobin from any blood residues is turning brownish, even some of the pigments from your carrots and celery are breaking down. It's this whole combination that creates those off-flavors people want to skim away. But, and this is so important to understand, the level of oxidation happening in your soup pot is really, really mild. It's just enough to affect the taste and maybe make your broth a little cloudy, but it is not creating harmful compounds in any significant way. So let's be absolutely crystal clear about this. Oxidized fat and trans fat are not the same thing. They're not even in the same ballpark. They are two completely different types of chemical changes. Think of trans fats as being fundamentally rewired. Their molecular structure has been totally re-engineered, usually in a factory. This rewiring is what makes them super stable for things like processed foods, but it's also what makes them so bad for our hearts. Oxidized fats, on the other hand, are just damaged. Nothing's been rewired. Instead, being exposed to oxygen has just started to break down the fat's natural structure. It's a process of degradation, not re-engineering. This table really spells it out, doesn't it? Just look at the cause row, an industrial process versus just being exposed to air. And check out the taste row. Trans fats are basically tasteless, which is why they're useful in packaged food. But oxidized fats? That's what gives you that distinct, stale, sharp, or rancid flavor. Now, that word, rancid, is a really important one. See, oxidation isn't just an on or off switch. It's a process. It's the very first step on the road to a fat going truly bad. This is such a great way to picture it. The early stage, the oxidation, that's like a cut apple that's just starting to turn a little brown. The process has started, sure, but it's not rotten. Rancidity, though, that's the late-stage breakdown. That's when the fat has truly spoiled and created those smelly compounds that your senses are basically designed to warn you away from. And trust me, your nose knows. If a fat has gone truly rancid, you'll know it. It gets this sharp, bitter smell. Some people say it smells like crayons or old paint, maybe even a little fishy. It is an unmistakable, do not eat this signal from your body. So let's be perfectly clear one more time. Simmering a stock on your stove for a few hours is not going to make the fats go rancid. Not even close. That process takes a lot more time. We're talking days, weeks, or even months of being exposed to oxygen, light, and warmth. Okay, so we've waded through a bunch of kitchen chemistry. Let's bring it all back home. What does this all actually mean for you the next time you've got a pot of soup simmering away? The bottom line is this: skim for the sake of your art, not for the sake of your health. If you want a crystal clear, clean-tasting broth, then by all means, skim away. But if you're making a big, hearty stew and you don't mind a little cloudiness for extra flavor, you can absolutely leave it be. It's your choice as the cook. Let's just end on this one definitive statement that sums it all up. The scum is protein and impurities. It is not trans fat, and cooking soup on your stovetop does not create trans fats. You can enjoy your amazing homemade soup with total confidence. So I'm going to leave you with one final thought. Now that you're an expert on fat oxidation, take a look in your own pantry. What about that big bottle of vegetable oil that's been open for a year? Or that half-eaten bag of walnuts? Yep, the very same process we just talked about in your soup pot is happening, very slowly, all over your kitchen. Food for thought.